Brought to you by JMR Rentals, professional digital cinema and broadcast equipment rentals in Brooklyn, New York. JMRNY.com. Hello and welcome to No Rest for the Weekend. I'm Jason Godbey, and joining me via Zoom today, she is the director and producer of the new documentary Still Working 9 to 5, Miss Camille Hardman. Welcome, Camille.
Hi, Jason. Thank you so much for having me today.
It's great to have you. I know that you're in like mid-shooting right now. You're coming to us from an undisclosed location on the West Coast.
You make it sound so mysterious.
Yeah. Well, you're doing a project, but you can't talk about it, I assume.
Yeah.
Okay. So we get a lot of that. We get a lot of mysteries on this show because people are always working on something and they can't talk about it until it's released and so forth. But what we can talk about is the documentary, obviously, which is what we're here to do, which is premiering at South by Southwest, which is tremendous. But before we talk about that, I want to talk to you about you. So, how did you get into filmmaking? What is your origin story, so to speak?
I have slightly unusual origin story. I was studying science at university, and a friend of mine had a part-time job working with quite a well-known documentary maker slash host in Australia. And she was going away and said, look, can you take over for me for a few weeks while I'm away? And then she came back and said, look, I don't really want to do this anymore. Do you want to keep going with the job? And I did. It was fabulous. And then we were making travel shows and animal shows. And then the gentleman that I worked with fell in love with a lovely lady and said, I don't want to travel anymore. Can you go out into the field? So I was sort of thrust out. I was like 23. No, I was younger than that. I was about 22. And I was just thrust out into the field. I didn't even end up finishing. I was in my last year of the science degree, but it was like science or traveling around to going to China and learning about pandas and filming pandas. South America, filming all different types of animals, tamanduas, panthers. I mean, it was really, really fascinating. So I had such an interesting foray into filmmaking.
So has your experience mainly been in documentary? Have you worked in the fictional narrative space as well?
I have. I worked on a on a film called Looking for Alibrandi. And I did that. So when I did my science degree, I came back and then I was doing a media degree at the University of Technology. And as a part of that degree, you have to have a producer attachment. And I ended up working with a wonderful producer called Robin Kershaw, who's quite well known in Australia. And I worked on Looking for Alibrandi, and it was good. I mean, there's a lot of people. I think that's the thing that I found. There's a lot of personalities, there's a lot of factions in filmmaking, and quite a few times when I have done it, there's a lot of personalities, which is great, and it can be wonderful, but sometimes I just want to get on with it. And when you're dealing with such a big crew, there's a lot of decisions that have to be made, and I'm a person that likes to make a decision and do it. And that's one of the other reasons I love doing documentaries too. I'm my own boss.
This film is interesting because you're talking about a fictional narrative film, a famous film, 9 to 5, which for those of you young people out there who don't know, came out in 1980, stars Jane Fonda, Dolly Parton, Lilly Tomlin. It was a huge comedy at the time and really changed a lot of things. So I kind of want to talk to you about, like, how did you get this gig? Like, how did this movie happen?
I created a TV show called Restored, which was on it's still actually on DIY and HGTV. And while I was working on that, Gary Lane and Larry Lane rang me up and they said, we're thinking about doing a documentary on 9 to 5 and the different iterations over the last 40 years. The fact that it had been original film, it was a musical, obviously it was a song. And then when the three women, the three icons, should I say, Jane, Lilly, and Dolly, went on the Emmys, they talked about a sequel. And so the guys were like, wow, this could be really interesting. So they rang me up, and originally I was like, I don't know, I'm busy, I've got this going on. And then, you know, it was fantastic. I looked at the history of that film and the fact that it came out of a organization of office workers and secretaries fighting for equal pay and fighting for actually just basic respect in the office. And I thought, now this is interesting. You know, there's this fabulous, you know, history of the women's movement that's running through the entire narrative. And then I looked at it and was like, okay, because, you know, I knew a little bit about 9 to 5, but I didn't really know a huge amount. And then I watched it again and I saw that the things that they were talking about, maternity leave, equality of pay, promotions, sexual harassment, as we know, because we did this film, we started in October 2018. So it was just after Me Too. And it was like, actually, this is really timely. And this could be really, really, really interesting. So, and it just at the same time, we had a hiatus. Discovery had just bought scripts and we had gotten a 6-episode run. And we were told, look, we need that sort of purchase to go through before more episodes of the show were going to be ordered. And so I was like, actually, you know, this is perfect timing. I can do this while I'm waiting for the episodes to happen. And then 4 years later, here I am.
For those who maybe haven't seen it, because it's been a long time since it's been out, can you briefly kind of give us a little synopsis of the plot and a little bit what happens in 9 to 5?
It's about 3 very different women who think they have absolutely nothing in common. And they have a boss that disrespects them in every single way possible. And they work out that if they come together, they will be able to not only fight their boss, but create change in the office. But the other thing that's special about 9 to 5 is it's so funny. It's really, really, really funny. And as despicable as Barney Coleman is in that role, he just nailed it. You don't dislike him. You actually love him in his awfulness. But what it does is it makes women turn back, sit back and go, wow, if I look, maybe that my colleague over there, I think that I don't have anything in common with, I actually do. And, and as I said, in unity, there's strength. And that's what I really loved about that film, is that it's just funny. It's funny and a strong message.
Dabney Coleman, he's sort of a wonderful bastard.
Yeah.
He's played that part. Like if you see him in Tootsie,
yes,
he's great in that as well. He's actually one of my favorite character actors, and he's still working. He's like, he's got to be like 80 or something right now. And I know he was in. I remember seeing him a few years ago in Boardwalk Empire. He was still doing stuff.
Yeah, he's in his 90s.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jane just turned 84, and I think Lilly is now 82. So and they are still going for it. I mean, they're amazing. We were so lucky, and it's so funny how we got Dabney. So there is a well-known HGTV host, and he is Dabney's nephew-in-law. And I knew that, and I rang him up and I said, would you be able to give me your uncle's phone number? And he did. So, and I rang up, and Dabney was, was like, yes, I'll do this. But, he had certain caveats. And then he and I became friendly, and we talked many, many, many times. And he was the last interview that we got in February before COVID.
Wow. So, like
2020.
nick of time.
Yeah,
Like
because otherwise we would have never have got him. I mean, even now, I don't think he would have interviewed with anybody.
one of the things I've always wanted to ask a documentary filmmaker, like when you're talking to like names, when you're talking to famous people, I mean, like sitting across from Jane Fonda, like every time I see Jane Fonda and something like, oh my God, they got Jane Fonda for this. You know what I mean? Like she's such a I don't know, force of nature. Is that, I don't know if that's too strong a word. What is the approach to that stuff, and how do you kind of get them to a point where they're comfortable and they're not just sort of doing the movie star thing and giving you a canned answer or something that sounds like a soundbite?
So we were very lucky that my partners already had a relationship with Dolly Parton. So they did a documentary a couple of years ago called Hollywood to Dollywood, and they produced that film, and it was about them. And through that, there was a trust that had been created. So Steve Summers, who is Dolly's creative director, is one of our EPs. And when we all got together and really formulated the idea, Gary and Larry went to Steve and said, we want to create this film. What do you think about this? Would you get behind it? And he said yes. And then he went with the idea to Dolly, and Dolly thought, oh, I think that's a fabulous idea. So she was one of the first people that we sat down. Karen Nasbaum was the first one, who's actually a very good friend of Jane Fonda's. And that is the reason why Jane Fonda and Bruce Gilbert came up with the idea from 9 to 5. So Karen was our first interview. And then Dolly was really, I think, our third or fourth interview. So once she came on board, as you can imagine, everybody said yes, because if they know that Dolly trusts this film, that means that it's in good hands, and we're going to treat the material and the subject matter in a very respectful way. Jane Fonda was a little bit harder, and Bruce Gilbert was a little bit harder. So Bruce and Jane had IPC films together. So they created Coming Home, China Syndrome, 9 to 5, and On Golden Pond. So Bruce I called, and it took me about 10 hours of conversations and a year to talk Bruce into it. And then once I got Bruce and Jane, Karen, I think, and then Dolly, and then my partners, Gary, were very close friends with somebody who knew Lilly. And so Lilly, then we interviewed Lilly, and she was fabulous. Her and I got on so well. We were laughing through the entire thing. If she wasn't really famous, I would have been like, oh, can I call you tomorrow and let's hang out? Because she was just, I just loved her. And Jane was, in all honesty, Jane was the hardest. And it took us, so we did Dabney in February, we did Jane in January. And we had to go out to Washington twice doing her Federal Fridays. The first time we didn't get the interview. The second time we were able to get to interview. And the only reason that was because of Karen Nussbaum and her husband, Ira, and Bruce. And I think all of Jane's, group around her said, these people are okay. They're going to be respectful. Trust them. And she said yes.
I assume that all three of them must have had still like a lot of fun, either memories of the film or really just think it's a piece of work that needs to be talked about 40 years on.
Yeah, I think so. With the three of them, I think it also, there's very fond memories. They really had a wonderful relationship, and they were three very strong women in a man's world doing a film about women in a man's world. And so I think they related to the material. I think they totally, you know, even though they're really such different people, and Dolly at that stage, she was a country and Western star. You know, she wasn't really in the mainstream. You know, a lot of people were absolutely surprised that she was doing a film with Jane Fonda. And she mentions that in our documentary. I mean, and there could have been an opportunity where she could have been crucified as well, you know, as much as Jane Fonda was during that time, because, you know, it was still in the 70s that this film was made. And I know she was asked a lot of difficult questions of, you know, how could you be doing this? But I think the strong message of women standing up and women, you know, fighting for respect, even that it wasn't about equality then, it was just respect. And everyone, you know, women wanted to be respected. And don't and Dolly Parton did, you know, she talks about in the film how, you know, her way of talking about women isn't necessarily going out and marching. It's writing songs, it's being in films like this where, you know, it's showing how women can support each other, and women can be, even though they're so different, can come together and really, you know, do small things that can initiate greater change. And I think really Dolly has has shown that throughout her entire career, that she is no pushover, but she's also not out there marching and, you know, as she says, you know, holding up banners. She is an example of a strong woman and the choices that she makes on an everyday basis.
Do you think the film still holds up now and is still relevant? And is that part of the impact also of your film?
I think it does. Absolutely. I mean, when the editor and we would be sitting in the edit suite, we would laugh and laugh and laugh. I mean, because it really is, it's hilarious. You know, and some of the things you wouldn't be able to do today. You know, would you be able to be so overtly sexist, which Dabney Coleman in the role of Mr. Hart was? You know, would you be able to get away with showing a character in that way? You know, I don't think so, but it does. I mean, you know, even the role reversal in that film, there's a scene where Dabney, you know, walks in and he's the secretary, and it is so funny. There's a part of it that doesn't, you know, I should say hold up, is when he gets kidnapped and it goes a little bit farcical. So there is a part that becomes a little bit silly, but I think the issues that they have in the film, which I mentioned before, you know, sexual harassment, maternity leave, lack of promotion, and pay equality, they're all things that women are talking about today, and things that really, really, you know, aren't up to scratch. You know, it's a travesty, this amount of sexual harassment, as we know with Me Too, that still goes on. You know, there's a lot of women that's happening to them every day because of, you know, power. They may be a single mother with 3 kids. They can't afford to stand up for themselves. So their boss is able to exert that power over them. They don't have a choice. You know, as we know, women of color, Latinx women, non-binary people, they also aren't getting paid appropriately for the job they do. You know, there's not a value system that equates everybody the same, unfortunately, and that needs to change. And the more things that are discussed and talked about, the more that we can make sure that there is that pay equality. We also know, you know, the tech industry is a great example that women aren't getting promoted. There is a lot of women don't even get jobs. And we've got an example in our film where we have a couple of women talk about, that they're not paid equally to the men that they work with, even though they've got the same job qualifications and actually higher stats. So I think those things do resonate now. And I think that's why 9 to 5, it's interesting. I've spoken to a lot of younger women lately, and either hearing about our film or hearing about the song, the new duet with Kelly Clarkson and Dolly Parton, they're like, what is this? There's this film that's a documentary that's about this film, and they've gone and watched the film and they're like, oh, wow, this is amazing. We absolutely, we equate with this movie. We resonate with it. We absolutely understand. That's us, even though that was 40 years ago. So I think that's really wonderful.
When I saw 9 to 5, I didn't think of it as a women's movie. I thought of it just as like a worker's movie. Like everybody who works a job and has a boss can relate to something in that. It was like Working Girl that Mike Nichols did years later. There was so much in that. Anybody who's, rode a desk for a living relates to those types of movies.
I was going to say, that's the one thing that's really clever about the script and that Colin Higgins did. He made it for a wide audience that men and women could both see it, enjoy it, and relate to it, and walk out with an anthem where everybody felt, I'm a working person and I deserve to be valued. And I think that was really what, and he and Jane and Bruce Gilbert were very cognizant that this had to be a film for everybody, and women would be carried away with that message as well.
You guys premiered at South by, which is awesome. What are the plans, if any, do you have now for distribution? If you don't have a distribution or a distribution that you can talk about anyway, where do you see the movie happening? Where do you see it being the most effective?
It's interesting. Distribution, we have no distribution. We are a little tiny film that was self-funded. We got one investor in 2020, Artemis Rising, who are amazing. And we were able to hold on to the movie ourselves. And that was a lot of hard work. We've just funded it all ourselves. And even when we did really want funding, I don't think anyone took us seriously. There was that. And I think what happened too, in the traditional funding, realms that you go through for, what are they called? Like going for grants. Everybody were like, you've got a whole bunch of famous people in your film. You'll sell it. You don't need help. And so that was the hard thing. And because everybody thought that we didn't need help, like all of us worked on deferred payment. I mean, the only people that didn't work, post-production people, that anybody on production, even our cameraman, we still owe him for all his time that he put toward the film. So but we've got a great sales agent now, and we have been told by the people who've seen it, by quite a few critics actually, that they really enjoy it. So that's fabulous. So we are hoping for a great sale with one of the streamers. And South by Southwest is a fabulous festival to launch on, because it's actually a culmination of film and music, which we both have in our film. We've got 10 Dolly tracks, and then we've got the new duet with Dolly and Kelly, and that's exclusive to South by Southwest. No one has heard that yet, except for the people working on the film, and that's going to be released later in the year. So it's a really nice little tidbit for people who are going to see the film for the first time and hear the song for the first time.
For those who do want to check out the trailer or know more about the film, where can they find you guys on the web?
Yeah, so it's stillworking9to5.com. We also on Facebook and Twitter at stillworking9to5. And that's also, yeah, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And then we also, for our travel budget, we're selling coffee. So we have our own line of coffee called Get Your Own Damn Coffee. So we've got a website as well. So that's all on our website, and we link to a shopping cart. So if anybody wants to help support us, Get Your Own Damn Coffee, a great presence for people. So please come to our website.
That sounds awesome. So thanks so much for doing this. I'm going to wrap up. Hopefully people will find and support the film, and you guys will have a great premiere here in New York. Maybe we can get to go see it. But for now, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you all out there for taking this trip down the rabbit hole once again. For more of our content, including our movie reviews, you can visit norestfortheweekendpodcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, youtube.com/getbehindtherabbit. I'd like to thank my guest, Camille Hardman, and our sponsor, JMR Rentals. For Behind the Rabbit Productions, I'm Jason Godbey. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.